I'm Whitney.
I'm Mindy.
And I'm Deb.
We're three best friends who love nerdy things.
Well, some people think we're nerdy, but we think we're pretty awesome.
This is Our Nerdiest Thing.
Hello, fellow nerds, and welcome to Our Nerdiest Thing. If you're watching on YouTube,
we are shaking our head while we say it.
Professional podcast
you look
face.
Like a Muppet.
Or a bobblehead.
Today we're talking about Butcher and Blackbird by Bryn Weaver, chapters 20 through 22. But before we get into it, Deb, will you please share about our nerdiest cocktail?
Now I'm going to shake my head. Yes, I will, Whitney.
It's a super good one today.
So actually, if you're watching our YouTube feed, you will be like, they're not drinking that. And it's because me and Mindy drank the whole pitcher while we recorded Tuesday's episode.
So yeah, it's gone.
Yeah, it's gone, but it was really good.
Yes.
It's called Bloody Sweet, and it's themed after fake breakups. This drink pairs well with saving the day, unlovable people, and actually I'm very fucking lovable. And it may cause you to be a psycho that they adore. Yeah, it's a really good. It's got vodka, amaretto, OJ, and cranberry juice in it. And it's, again, I feel like every time I do a cocktail, it sounds like it would not go together. But it was really, really
good.
Obviously, we thought it was delightful.
Yes. So, I mean, amaretto and vodka, say less.
Right. I mean, I can't because I've had a lot to drink. But the cocktail will be on our Instagram at Our Nerdiest Thing and at ournerdiestthing.com.
It's a delight.
It is.
And I'm about to burp. That's why I'm stepping away.
Well, it's time for the nerdy and dirty recap. The wheel has spoken. Mindy, whose name has it spoke?
It has spoken. D-E-M.
What?
D-E-B.
D-E-B. D-E-B.
Dem.
That would be Deeb.
We just got finished talking about how much cocktail I've drank.
She's like, I can't spell.
So
I should not have tried that. But yes, it's Deb's turn.
Spelling? You've not tried spelling?
Not while I've been drank 3 of those.
I liked the enthusiam. I thought it was great. I loved it.
D-E-M.
So,
That's an ebb.
D-E-M.
Which is worse. I am kind of a dweeb.
Deeb has 30 seconds to tell us what happened in this section of the book. Are you ready? And go.
Sloan and Co. are late to the restaurant, and Rowan is freaking out. Rowan kind of bites Sloan's head off and feels awful for her, but asks her to meet him later at the restaurant so they can connect. Rowan goes to 3 and Coach, and David's there. Well, David is not mute after all, but a motherfucking serial killer.
Boo.
David tells Rowan to get Sloan to leave, or he will make Rowan watch him kill her. Rowan says some atrocious shit to Sloan and breaks up with her. Sloan figures something out that it was code and returns to 3 and Coach, but not before David has mandolin sliced off Rowan's skin to eat. Sloan arrives and pretends to be infatuated with David, only to cut off both his hands and slit his throat. And Sloan is very fucking lovable, and we all forgive Rowan for tearing her heart out.
That was great.
40-second countdown.
Yeah, just a little bit over. But
this part,
happened.
he fucking broke my heart.
Oh, I know.
I
The
was
first
like-
time I read this, I was like, are you kidding me?
And if the author had not made it where you knew that David was there, I may have hated him.
Yeah,
Right.
100%.
Because like he leaves the house all that day acting weird and stuff, and I would have been like, "What the fuck?
Yeah.
What are you doing, you idiot?"
Well, let's go ahead and get into the details, but let's start with our favorite moment, which I don't think is going to be that one for any of us.
No.
What were your all's favorite moments?
In general, these are just some of my favorite chapters. I just think everything is so fast paced. And I know last week we talked about what's going to happen. Like, I feel like this is the HEA we all wanted, and now what's going to happen. And this is what happens. And it's just completely sinister and totally off the rails. But my favorite moment is when Sloan frees Rowan after he's been tortured, and all he wants to do is hold her. And she finally breaks her act, and he tells her how much he loves her, and she's his psycho and he's hers.
Yeah, it's really sweet. Yeah, it was really, really
He
sweet.
better have said that.
I know, right? He had some splaining to do.
Yeah, he really did. Deb, what was your favorite moment?
Mine is just Sloane being a fucking psycho. So, first of all, she dumps out all of Rowan's bathroom products, and she says, because that's what a fucking psycho would do. And the cat suddenly likes her.
Yeah.
And then she convinces David within, like, literal moments that Rowan is weak sauce, and she'd rather have David only to slice and dice him.
Yep.
Which I really appreciated. Her whole thing in this. I mean, she is a fucking psycho in like all the best ways. I loved it. Loved it. What was yours, Whit?
Loved her. I actually picked Brynn Weaver's writing as my favorite moment because she is so good with the descriptions, especially with the torture that Rowan is going through. She is so talented at sensory details, and the description of David slicing Rowan's skin off with the mandolin.
Oh my God.
And then like savoring it and slowly putting it in his mouth. Like she is so descriptive.
You almost gag.
It's disgusting, but like awesome at the same time. Like you have to be a good writer.
What's worse, that or the ice cream?
Oh, I think this
100%.
The mandolin.
This was my least favorite moment.
I picked the ice cream as worse because like it was semen.
Yeah, well, that's true.
But, okay, so this is why this is my least favorite.
I've picked the skin off the side of my thumb. I've never had semen. Well, that's not true.
Okay, but no. Rewind. Oh my fucking
Oh,
this is why we shouldn't drink the whole pitcher.
Probably not. Yeah. It was just too good. Oh Lord.
But anyway, Brynn Weaver's a good writer.
She is.
Okay, I'm good. I'm good.
All right, so let me tell you though why this moment was my least favorite moment. Because
tell us what it was again.
So he's not just so when David's using the mandolin to scrape away Rowan's skin, it's not like he's just picking a hangnail. He is like taking layers of his skin and blood off, and then he puts it up to Rowan's mouth to make him eat it.
Yeah, that was gross.
And just
did I block that out?
Yes.
Yeah, you must have.
He made him eat it.
Well, he tried to.
He like teased him.
Yeah,
with
he like
it.
rubbed it up against his lips and
then he ate it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But just generally, David's physical and mental torture of Rowan was really hard to read, but in a good way.
Yeah.
Like,
Well,
because of her writing.
Speaking of mental and physical torture. Sorry, that's a really bad segue to a dark topic, but I'm going to piggyback off of you and talking about David to go into my deep dive. So I gave everybody a break last episode from true crime, but I'm back, baby.
Back, baby doll.
I'm back with my true crime deep dive. So I was inspired this week by David, the character. The idea of being caught on camera, getting away with murder, and ultimately getting what's coming to you in the end. So I'm going to tell you about a true crime case from right here in Louisville from the 80s. So
I
here we
don't
go.
like real shit.
Well,
You probably saw this all over the TV.
well, she wasn't here.
Oh, that's true.
Yeah, so you probably don't know
Yeah,
this
you
story.
weren't
So-
I didn't even live here.
So let me tell you about it. So in September 1988, Brenda Sue Schaefer was reported missing by her family. So Brenda was a 36-year-old divorcee who worked for a local dentist, and she was living with her parents, going through a rough financial patch after being divorced. So she had been born and raised in Louisville, which is where our podcast is based. Her family were very devout Catholics. She had married her high school sweetheart, and it doesn't seem like that marriage or relationship generally was very healthy. He seems to have been very controlling and domineering, and they struggled a lot with their relationship before they ultimately divorced. And then after that, Brenda was not very social. Her self-esteem took a really big hit. She didn't date or go out very much, but she did ultimately have an 8-year relationship with a man who loved her very much and was very well liked by her friends and family. And by all accounts, he wanted to marry her, but he had a drinking problem. And it was kind of hard in my research if he actually had a problem with his drinking or if Brenda just had a problem with his drinking. Like, it wasn't super clear, but she had a problem with it, and that's
Either way, it's a no-go.
right.
Yeah.
So it stopped her from being able to commit to marriage with him, and that ultimately ended this relationship. And she had a really hard time after this 8-year relationship ended. She was beautiful, but she just struggled with low self-esteem, and it seems like she had a really hard time to not put all of her self-worth into anything other than her romantic partner, which a lot of people struggle with, right? So at the time of Brenda's disappearance, her family reported her missing after she didn't come back home from a date with the current boyfriend that she had been seeing for a couple of years at that point. So soon after the end of her 8-year relationship, Brenda went on a double date with her best friend's boyfriend, and a man named Mel Ignatow. Mel, by all accounts, wasn't very cute, and Brenda didn't seem to ever think that he was, but he listened to her. He gave her a lot of the attention that she was kind of missing and craving after the end of this 8-year relationship and a divorce, and she was into it. And so Mel was comfortable financially, and that appealed to Brenda as well. You know, somebody who had been divorced, had been out on her own, and now was struggling to get back out of her parents' house and be financially independent. So she and Mel started seeing each other, but it was not a good relationship. I don't think it was ever a good relationship. So much like her marriage, Mel was very controlling, and his behavior escalated into abuse. He would try to convince Brenda to fulfill sexual fantasies that she was not interested in, and he would have Brenda take what he called sex pills, and she would pass out and wake up naked,
So roofies.
not remembering anything about what had happened to her. He would call her work while she was working and harass her about not being available to talk to him or who she was talking to, who she was socializing with. He traveled for work a lot, and when he was going to be out of town, he scheduled all of their calls down to the minute and would absolutely lose it on her if she was late, even by like a few seconds on these scheduled phone calls. So her friends and family really hated him, and she, you know, she shared a lot of these things with some of her friends and family. They knew that he was very controlling. They saw that she was unhappy,
and they'd already watched her go through it.
Exactly.
Once.
She'd been through a rough marriage and divorce, and you know, this hard time with the 8-year relationship breaking up, and they really encouraged her to leave him multiple times over the couple of years that they were together. But like many women that are, you know, victims of domestic violence from their partners, she had a hard time just walking away. But on September 21st, 1988, Brenda called her ex-boyfriend, the one that she had dated for 8 years, and told him that she had actually broken up with Mel. And the night she went missing was supposed to be her final time seeing Mel to give him back his stuff, according to what Brenda had told the ex-boyfriend. So I broke up with him, but I'm going to go see him next week, give him back all of his stuff. So the police questioned the boyfriend, Mel Ignatow, and he said, yes, we had broken up. This was supposed to be our final date to just provide closure, and she was supposed to bring me back some jewelry. So by all accounts, Brenda absolutely saw Mel that night and just never came home. So her family says they waited up all night, because remember, she's coming home to her parents' house, right? So they said that they waited all night for her to come home, and she never did. And the boyfriend was soon the focus of the investigation. So he was the last person to see her. And in cases like these, the boyfriend or the partner is like the number one suspect at first, right? Like, let's rule this guy out first, and then we'll go from there. So they really couldn't find any evidence of anything looking for Brenda. They couldn't find any physical evidence. They couldn't find any kind of scene of struggle. They couldn't get any information from Mel. They couldn't find Brenda, if living or deceased. They had no idea what had happened, and they basically had no leads other than she went on a date with Mel and he has a sketchy past, right? He says that he had dropped her off at 11:30 that night. Her parents said that she never came home, so it was kind of a no-go. They ended up finding Brenda's car and finding some evidence that something had gone down, but they still couldn't find Brenda. They couldn't get any information from Mel. So they were pretty convinced that Mel had killed Brenda, but they had nothing to prove that or to arrest him for that. So they invited him to go before a grand jury to basically like prove his innocence. Like, come to a grand jury, let's get this on the record, prove your innocence, give us your alibi, all that stuff. Let's get it all on the record. And he was like, sure, I'll do that. So during this grand jury appearance, Mel mentions the name of an ex-girlfriend of his, Mary Ann Shore. And by bringing her up during this grand jury interview, I guess is the best way to say that, because he brings her up, he pulls her into the investigation, and the police and authorities are able to go ask her some questions because he
mentioned her. Yeah.
He brought her up, right? So Mary Ann Shore is an ex-girlfriend of Mel's. They had broken up a couple of years before he started seeing Brenda. So the police go to question Mary Ann about her relationship with Mel and any connection that she might have had or still has to Brenda. So eventually the pressure becomes too much for Mary Ann. At first she says, I know Mel, I know of Brenda, I can't help you. That's all I got, right? She gives them basically nothing, and they keep asking questions, and then she eventually tells them not only does she know what happened to Brenda, she was actually a part of it. So Mary Ann goes to the police and says Mel knew that Brenda was planning on breaking up with him, and he started to meticulously plan her murder and asked Mary Ann to help him. Mary Ann is also a messed up person and wanted Mel back and knew that she needed to get Brenda out of the way to do that. So she took that opportunity and said, sure, I'll help you with this. So according to Mary Ann, when Mel and Brenda were out, they were together that night on that final date. He brought Brenda to Mary Ann's house, where Mel then raped, tortured, and eventually killed Brenda, while Mary Ann took pictures of the whole thing. This is all what Mary Ann is telling them.
Right.
So Mary Ann says that they buried Brenda's body behind Mary Ann's house, and she led the police right to Brenda's body on her property in a shallow grave. So that proved that Brenda had been murdered. But at this point, it had been just over a year since Brenda's disappearance, and it's also the 80s.
Right.
So any kind of physical evidence, any kind of DNA that they could get is all gone at that point. So they're able to do an autopsy, but they don't have any physical evidence. So the autopsy showed signs of abuse like Mary Ann had described, but there is no evidence to prove that it was Mel that did it. So in any case, he was charged with Brenda's murder, but all the prosecutors had at that point was basically the word of Mary Ann as their star witness. They have a body that's been murdered, but there's no proof to link it to a specific person that did it other than Mary Ann herself.
I was about to say
because it was her information
testimony.
and her property, right?
Right.
So of course the defense is like, well, Mary Ann did it. Hello. Clearly she did it. He doesn't have anything to do with it. So Mel, of course, says he doesn't have anything to do with it. And, it's Mary Ann's word against his. So at this point, the media in Louisville had been reporting on this case like crazy, as you can imagine. And the general public was pretty convinced that Mel is definitely guilty. So his lawyers got the trial moved because, you have to have like an unbiased pool for a jury. So the trial got moved out to Kenton County, Kentucky, which is like kind of the sticks, or at least it was in the 80s.
Also, like, really not far enough away, I don't feel like.
Yeah, I agree. But it has to stay in Kentucky,
It has
right?
to stay in Kentucky, yeah.
Okay.
So the defense, of course, argued, like I said, Mary Ann was the one that killed Brenda. Everything was her property and based on her information, not Mel's. Mel's been saying the whole time, I don't know, right? So there are 3 things that happened during this trial to sway the jury in Kenton County. So number 1, there was a recorded conversation. Mary Ann, of course, I don't think I said this. She's giving all this information as like a plea bargain, right? Like, I'm in deep shit. I'll tell you what I know if you go easy on me, right? So after she gives all this information to the police, Mel at a certain point doesn't know that she's talking to them. So they started to give her wires and go talk to him and try to get him to confess, right? So they played a lot of these recorded conversations during the trial at Kenton County. So during one of those recordings, Mary Ann and Mel were talking about the burial site of Brenda's body. And Mel says in the recording, that place we dug is not shallow. Beside that one area right by where that site is does not have any trees by it. But the recording wasn't super clear, and the jury decided that he did not say where that site is, but that he said where that safe is. And therefore couldn't possibly be talking about a body.
Oh my
Must
God.
be talking about a buried safe. So this was one of the like smoking guns for the prosecution.
Yeah.
And they were like, no, sorry, we don't buy it. So that was one thing that was not great for the prosecution. The second thing that happened during... I tried to find details about this before I say these next two things. I tried to find more details and I couldn't really find actual details about like context or anything. So this is just very vague. But the second thing that happened during the trial is that during some of her testimony, the prosecution's star witness, Mary Ann Shore, laughed. And the jury didn't like that. Oh, and they thought that it took away her credibility some. But again, I'm not sure what the context is. Just the fact that she laughed, I don't get it.
She could have just been nervous.
That's what I was going to say. A lot of people laugh when they're nervous.
Right. So the third and final nail in the coffin for the prosecution's case is my personal favorite. She said sarcastically. Mary Ann wore a mini skirt to the trial.
Oh, dear God.
And the jury didn't like that very much.
She was just asking for a conviction.
Oh my and so
she said sarcastically.
Right, exactly. So the jury decided that between the miniskirt and the laughter that they couldn't trust Mary Ann. And their interpretation of that recorded conversation, they basically didn't have evidence based on their understanding of the case. That's crazy. The jury voted that Mel should be acquitted, not just like innocent or not guilty, but acquitted of all the charges, because it was like rape, torture, murder, all this stuff, right? The judge was so embarrassed and upset by this jury's decision that he apologized to Brenda Schaefer's family and said, if this had been a bench trial and not a jury trial, I would have found him guilty 1,000%. Like, this is an embarrassment and a miscarriage of justice. But that's how the justice system works. So the judge couldn't really do anything. So fortunately or unfortunately, depending on how you want to look at it, Brenda Schaefer's parents had both passed away before that trial ever began. So while they never saw any justice for anybody for their daughter, they also didn't see that would have been very difficult to live through that and see this man be acquitted. Mel Ignatow gets acquitted. Authorities still believe that he was 1,000% guilty, but what are they going to do? Yeah. So he is now back in Louisville living in a new house because he had to sell his old house to pay for his defense attorneys. So 6 months after the trial ends, the new owners of his house that he had sold were doing some renovations.
Oh, God.
And when a worker pulled up some carpet in the hallway, that worker found a plastic bag with some jewelry and 3 rolls of undeveloped film. When the film got developed, these are the pictures that Mary Ann Shore told authorities about, had testified about in the trial. Brenda Schaefer being tortured, raped, and murdered. Oh, God. But Mel Ignatow's face is actually not in any of the pictures. They're not. However, the police matched up body hair patterns and mole patterns on his body in the pictures to his actual body to prove that it was him. However,
he had been acquitted.
He had already been acquitted. So, double jeopardy, you can't be charged with murder a second time if you've already been acquitted or found innocent, right? So they can't do anything about the murder. However, you remember Mel went before a grand jury to prove his innocence?
Perjury.
He explicitly said during that grand jury interview that he did not kill Brenda. So he was charged with federal perjury charges. And during that federal trial, he knew that he couldn't be charged with Brenda's murder at that point. So he confessed to everything. During the trial, and basically was like, yep, I killed her, because he knew that he couldn't get in trouble for it. So he was convicted and sentenced to 8 years in federal prison for federal perjury charges. And then when that 8 years had been served, he was charged and sentenced to 9 years for state perjury charges, because that's all they could do. Right. That's all they could get him on.
I guess it's better than nothing, but
it is better than nothing, but still, like,
he got
17
away with murder.
years for someone's life
makes you want to scream.
Yeah.
So he was ultimately released from prison for good in 2006. And then just a couple years after that, in 2008, Mel Ignatow was found dead in his home when he was 70 years old, a home that was only 4 miles away from Mary Ann Shore's old house where he had murdered Brenda. He bought a house like right by the scene of the crime. So the circumstances of his death are a little sketchy. So he lived by himself. He was 70 years old. It seems like, number one, he wasn't in good health generally, and he was found. I'm not clear how long he had been dead before he was found dead in his apartment, but it looks like He fell off of a ladder and bled to death because he fell onto a glass coffee table and cut his head, his arm, ? And then bled to death. A lot of people believe that this was poetic or even paranormal justice because before he killed Brenda Schaefer, there are pictures that show Mel Ignatow tied her down to a glass coffee table.
Ooh. A little bit of just desserts.
Yeah.
Right? So, after murdering the young and beautiful Brenda Schaefer just for having the audacity to want to live her life without an abusive sociopathic partner, Mel Ignatow died a slow, painful death, bleeding out on his apartment floor, alone and hopefully miserable.
Oh, no. That's so sad.
And that
I
is
remember that story.
Brenda Sue Schaefer,
Yeah.
murdered by Mel Ignatow.
That's awful.
Yeah. It shook our.
So, did the woman not have any charges against her?
She
or
did.
She was.
But they were just lesser. I didn't really focus on all those details because I was trying to find stuff on him, but and on Brenda Sue Schaefer too. But yeah, she had lesser charges. She definitely had stuff, but she was the informant, right?
Yeah.
So she got a good deal.
Well, I mean, if any of her family is still alive, like, our thoughts go out to them.
I know.
Obviously.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
I know there's been at least one book written about this. I think it's called Double Jeopardy, but I can't remember what the author's name would be. But I know that that's been like a Dateline or 48 Hours special. Like this is a case that has been talked about a lot. I knew that he had been acquitted, but I thought that he had been acquitted because there was no evidence. I didn't know that he was acquitted because the jury was
She
bad.
wore a short
Yeah.
skirt.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, like, come on.
The jury were assholes.
Who gives a shit?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, anyway, it's also the late 80s and people had a lot of assumptions that weren't.
Unfortunately,
that
people
weren't
still
okay.
judge women that way, though.
I know.
Well, that's
I know.
true. That's true. Well, that's
Yeah.
depressing, but
Yes,
but,
it is.
but accurate.
But so was your whole story.
I know, right? I know. I hope you guys enjoyed the break last week from stories like this.
That's
But-
okay. I'm talking about serial killers later, too.
I know, right? Well, Dave, it felt like it fit. We can't read these books and not talk about that case because it's here.
Right,
yeah.
It's
Right.
a local case. But I'm like, well, we got like Caught on Camera.
Yeah.
You've got the Just Desserts in the end. Like,
Absolutely.
it felt like it matched. It felt like it fit.
I really
So-
hope it was a paranormal type of thing.
I do
I know.
too.
Isn't that
I
like-
would love to think that she was like, you know what?
Fuck you.
especially
Yeah.
since he like housed himself up right near where
Well, that's
he,
what they
Yeah,
do,
like-
though, because they
Right.
want to be close to the crime scene.
Yeah.
right.
Right.
So
Yeah.
So
Disgusting.
that's that story.
Neat.
But, well, I can tell you about my least favorite moment because it wasn't that deep dive. Did you tell your least favorite moment
didn't,
yet, Deb?
but go
Okay, here
ahead.
you go first because I've talked a lot.
Mine was just Rowan using all of Sloane's insecurities against her.
Yeah.
So we know.
Mine too. That was
yeah,
mine too.
we know he's trying to get her to leave 3 and Coach so that he can keep her safe because David says, I'll kill her in front of you.
Right.
Right.
And he will.
So,
Yeah.
but Rowan calls her a psycho. He tells her she's unlovable. And he pretty much tells her that she's too much to handle for anyone. And don't forget that Sloane has 2 friends, Lark and Rowan. So she believes him
Yeah.
Of course.
and leaves. So yeah, it was for me just heartbreaking.
Yeah.
Right. And I mean, I forgive Rowan now, but I mean, I don't know how much I forgive him. That was pretty awful.
Yeah, it was-
but he had to do
was.
what he had to do, but I still hated it. Why didn't you like it, Whit?
Pretty much all those same things. I said the same thing. I know he was trying to get her to leave to keep her safe, but the fact that he goes for all of these real insecurities that he knows are her real insecurities is just hard to read and hard to
I
take.
mean, he couldn't say, I left you a present at the apartment. Go
Right.
back and get it real quick.
That's what I know. Right. Like, I don't necessarily think that he did
Lark
anything.
is at the apartment. Go see her and bring her back.
Right. Like, I don't think he did anything wrong per se.
Right.
But it was hard to read. But you mentioned this a little bit earlier. One thing that I really like about Bryn Weaver's writing here is that she opted for dramatic irony, which is where you as the audience, you know something that a character
Right.
doesn't know,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
She didn't have to do that for us as the reader.
I do wonder if the editors were like, they're going to hate him too much.
Right.
Because I
Like,
think I would have hated him.
100%. Like
Yeah.
the fact that we know why he's doing what he's doing makes it
A
heartbreaking.
little more palatable, though.
Yes, like it makes it still an emotional gut punch, but for a completely different reason.
Yeah.
And you are ready to forgive him. And you're, instead of being mad at Rowan, I feel like I was more figure it out, Sloane. You know what I mean?
Do you think that Rowan knew that she had put that camera in there all along?
I don't know.
I don't know that he
Because
did
it never really says like why she put the camera in there, or like it, like she just says at some point she did it,
Yeah.
right? And so I'm like, okay, he gave her a clue, and then he's like, well, her camera's still in here that no one knows about. Like, I feel like Rowan, being who he is and doing the serial killery shit that he does, would be pretty observant and notice that.
Well, and even if it's not because I'm a serial killer, I know these things, I feel like he knows Sloane well enough to know that she would want to put a camera there.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Interesting. I would like to think that he knows that. Well, let's go into biggest revelations. Mine was basically David.
Yep. Same.
Mine first was David didn't get a lobotomy, and I'm like, what the fuck?
Yeah.
Can I point out though, he's been faking being mute for months. I
know.
He lives in a facility for people living with intellectual disabilities.
Right.
Like
Yeah.
he is in for the long con.
Yeah.
And we also find out that he's trying to befriend Sloane because he has realized there is a pattern of serial killers dying every August.
Yeah.
And he's like, well, I think they're going to come after Thorsten next, so I'm going to just
I'm going
pretend.
to glom on there. Yeah.
Super smart.
Yeah, it really was.
Very smart. Like
Brilliant
scary
plan.
smart. Yeah.
Yeah.
One thing he did say, this was another revelation for me, was I think it was David that said people do have a way of disappearing around the Montagues, talking about Lark.
I wrote that down too.
And I was like, that's some foreshadowing to Leather and Lark, because Lark's kills are more personal.
Yeah, 100%.
So
I actually don't know how Lark doesn't get caught.
I know.
She's so impulsive.
Yeah.
Somebody like Lachlan cleans it up.
True.
Cleans it up for her.
Yeah.
But no, I wrote down that exact same
Yeah.
thing. David is the one that says that. And
Yeah.
I noticed that this read
I was like,
too.
oh, that's some foreshadowing.
Yeah, I've noticed a lot of little things like
Yeah.
that where I'm like, oh, this makes so much more sense
Yeah.
after reading Leather and Lark.
Yeah.
Was David your biggest revelation?
He was.
Too?
Mhm.
Yeah. Just David.
Fucking David.
It's a good twist.
Oh, David.
Because at first you're really like, oh my gosh, I can't believe that waiter left him there and didn't notice that he was
Yeah.
supposed to go home. And he's been sitting there by himself in the dark and he
Yeah.
didn't know what to do. And you really feel for him. And then all of a sudden you're like, wait, motherfucker.
I like too. One thing I noticed, and maybe I hesitate to even say this because it might just be like, no, Whitney, you're dumb and didn't get it. But when
It's never that for the record. But
when you're reading from Rowan's point of view and all of a sudden there's a gun in his face, for a second, it's not explicitly clear that it is David with the
Right.
gun.
You're right.
Like
Mhm.
it could be David, but it could also be
Anybody.
somebody else.
Yeah.
Right?
Right. Yeah.
And I felt like that heightened the tension a little bit. And then I was like, oh, am I just dumb and didn't get it? Like,
no,
was
I think
supposed
she
to know?
wrote it like that on purpose.
Yeah.
Well, good job.
You're
Brandon
very
Weaver.
smart. Whit. Don't worry. You're still the smartest person on this podcast.
I don't think that's accurate, but I appreciate it.
Well, let me
The
say this. I know
compliments.
you're smarter than me. I don't know that.
Well, let's go about favorite spicy scene.
I mean,
That's
there's,
not a sentence
there's
that
no
makes sense.
fucking in this.
No, there's not.
I did love everything leading up to Rowan's toast to Sloane at the restaurant. Because
Mine
I mean,
too.
it was more sweet than spicy, but I did love that moment when Rowan has just been rushing around doing owner stuff, right? Which major BDE, by the way. And then he just takes a moment to wax poetic about how much he loves her, and in front of
He's-
everybody.
All his luck was like given
Yes.
to him with her.
Yes. Are we the same person? Because I
I
wrote
feel
almost like you said it's not spicy, but it is sweet, and I wrote no, not spice, but sweet.
Oh
Like,
my
in
gosh,
notes,
this is weird. We are on the same wavelength.
So
Sure.
mine is also my favorite quote, and it's after they've reconciled after David is dead, and Rowan says, "You've never been unlovable. You were just waiting for someone to love you for who you are, not who they want you to be."
Yes.
And my panties fell off.
Rowan just makes me wet.
He does.
He does.
Well, who did you guys pick for your chapter MVP?
How about you, Whit?
I picked Sloane.
I sort of picked Sloane.
Oh, yeah?
You tell me why
Why?
you picked Sloane.
I picked Sloane because she saves the day, really. Like, she figures out Rowan's code when he's talking about April 10th, April 13th. Like, she figures out, like, wait, that means something. She figures out that he's talking about Thorsten/David. She thinks to look at the camera feed at the restaurant and sees what's going on.
Can you imagine being Rowan, though, and she walks in full makeup and eyelashes? Because she was like, I'm not going to the airport ugly.
Yeah.
He's like, she took time to do that?
Yeah. He did clock the like super thick eyelashes when she
Right.
walked in. I thought that was funny. She calls Lachlan for information and for backup, knowing that he is the person she needs to talk to, right? She gives Rowan a taste of his own medicine a little bit when she's pretending to, like, lying for David's benefit, pretending like she's not into
Yeah.
Rowan and wants to join forces with David. And then she's actually effective because, you know, Rowan lies to her to save her, but then puts himself in danger and then
Yeah.
is like, oh no, what do I do? And Sloane is like, well, I'm going to come kill this fucker.
Yeah.
And then I'll
Which
save
is
you.
sort of like been how it's been.
Exactly. Right. Like, she kind of does everything.
Yeah.
So she was my chapter MVP.
Who was yours, Deb?
Mine was Lark. And
Oh.
it's for two different quotes. So Sloane calls her and tells her that she and Rowan have broken up, right? And Lark says, that's what he said to you, and you didn't pluck his eyeballs out and flush them down the toilet.
That's one of my favorite quotes.
And then this is such a best friend quote. She said, I mean, he's clearly fucked up in the head if he's going to give you up, so I don't know what's going on upstairs. I just felt best friend energy, and it's what Sloane needed to hear in
Yep.
that moment. Like,
100%.
literally, like, girl, you've done nothing.
Yeah.
What the fuck is wrong with him? And I
Yeah.
love that so much.
Yeah, I like
Yeah, because
that,
doesn't
too.
she also pick up the phone and go, hey, Gold Star Tits? Like,
Yes,
I
she
love that.
does.
Yeah.
Yep.
So mine was the duo of Lark and Sloane.
Oh, look at us.
So I just think they're the bestie duo extraordinaire. Like you said, Lark doing her bestie thing, talking to Sloane, trying to cheer her up while still trying to get to the bottom of this whole, like, it's like she's still asking questions like, this doesn't sound right. What's going on?
Right. This has to be a mistake.
Then she throws in those threats about maiming Rowan, which just is hilarious.
Yeah.
And then Sloane, for all the
And I
reasons
think she
mentioned.
would've.
She definitely would have. And then Sloane, just for figuring out the weird clue, for having the forethought to install the cameras, and then
Yeah.
getting shit done.
Yeah,
Yeah.
1,000%.
But like together, they were like the dynamic duo.
That's funny because Lark is one of my favorite secondary
Oh,
characters.
really?
Yeah, I picked Lark and Lachlan
Why?
as my favorite
because
secondary.
Lachlan is my secondary, so I want to hear why
Well,
their duo is for you.
I have them because they are Sloane's first phone calls for two different reasons, right?
Yeah.
Like, Lark is the phone call, kind of what you were talking about, the emotional support. She's there to give that support and to speak the truth. Like, he loves you. There's something, there has to be a mistake, right? And then when she knows that she needs help, she knows to call Lachlan for that first call. He's the seedy underground killer, is what I
Yeah.
called him in my notes. And he can get that information to help her find out more about David so that she can save Rowan.
I do
right?
love how she was comfortable enough to call him and be like, hey.
I loved that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So mine's kind of the same. So Lachlan, for me, he still calls Sloane Spider Lady, which I love. And if you listen to the audio, like, it's really cute. And then he figures out who David is in like 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Like, it
Oh,
takes
yeah.
him no time. It's like he never saw David, so he wouldn't know. But when she tells him about him, he's like, oh my God, like, you got to be
Yeah.
careful. But Lachlan also sends reinforcements in case Sloane needs help. But he also knows not to send them in.
Yep.
Unless and he's watching on the video feed, right?
Yeah.
And he sends in a cleanup crew. Like, he's just
know.
like, he really took care of his brother in that moment without being like the dude that's like, gotta take care of his brother. He knew
Right.
Sloane had
Yep.
it.
Yeah, he helped but didn't take over.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Who was your secondary character, Mindy?
Mine was Winston the cat. Because he, like, when Rowan is a dick to her at the apartment
Yeah.
before he leaves, he's bothering Rowan until he gives him some bacon, and then Rowan says, he's kind of a dick. I just love how he ruffles Rowan's feathers. But then he does the most cat-like thing ever and turns into an angel to comfort Sloane, which is
Yeah.
seriously,
They
like,
can feel that stuff.
they can. They totally know when you're not feeling well or you're sad. My cat always comes up and gets in my face.
My dog does that with us, too.
So
That's
I mean,
what I want when I'm sad, is something to be in my face. Said no one ever.
If it's a cute pet, though, it's.
I know it's
This is why you guys have pets. So I'd be like, cat, get out of my face. Although I have to tell you, I was sorry to interrupt, but
No,
I was
I'm
at
done.
this art show this weekend, and as I was setting up this little, because it was on like this farm, right? And obviously it was the farm dog,
Oh, yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah.
It's this little black lab, and he's running around. And he comes up, and I give him like a little scratch, and I'm like, hey, little guy. And the woman across from me had product I liked. And then I watched her go like, ugh, get away from me from the dog. And I was like, I'm not buying your shit. What kind of asshole?
You can tell a lot of person about how they treat pets.
Yeah. And here's the thing. I mean, you guys know I'm not a super big animal person, but I like animals. And I was at his house.
Yeah, you don't have to be mean to him.
Yeah, but
you don't have to
get
like
away.
him.
Like, go. And I was like, oh, you're a bitch. I don't like you.
Like, oh, you're one of those. Well, let's talk about favorite quotes. You shared one of mine. Yeah. One of mine.
How many you got?
I had 4. So the one from Lark about like plucking his eyeballs and flushing them down the toilet, that made me laugh. Lachlan also made me laugh when Sloane is talking to him on the phone. My YouTube friends see me doing the old school
the rotary
the rotary phone. She says I might change my mind and kill Rowan, and Lachlan says, do me a favor, give him a big sloppy kiss instead. And I thought that was really funny and also cute. And then Rowan had one quote that made me laugh and one that I thought was really sweet. The one that made me laugh where he's like, can you like untie me and get me up? And she just glares at him and he says, or I'll just bleed out on the floor. That's cool.
But I have to say, he's using like all the nicknames he's used on her, like Blackbird, Sweetie, Peaches. Yeah. He's like, just like, please, for the love of God, untie me.
Yeah,
it's
he
really
says,
cute.
Getting out of the chair would still be aces, preferably with no stabbing, which I really liked. And then the sweet one was, you might be psycho, but you're my psycho, and I'm yours.
I loved that.
I thought that was really sweet. So
I would fuck the shit out of him.
I know, seriously. I mean, I was a little disappointed we didn't get him in our book boyfriend.
I know. We got the other two Kane brothers.
It would, for me, it would have been Rune, Castile, Rowan.
Yeah. What were your favorite quotes, Mindy?
I don't know. He might have gone over Castile, actually.
I had 3 short ones. When Rowan asks to borrow Sloane's e-reader and she replies, get fucked, in a loving way, of course.
Okay, again, in the audio, I know I keep bringing this up, but every time she says that, she goes, get fucked. And I love it because it sounds so sweet and innocent.
I love that.
Yeah.
And then, of course, when she says, I am not unlovable, I'm very fucking lovable. I just like that. I can just picture that moment. And then the sweet moment from Rowan, this is just, I think it's the end of one of the chapters. It said, the world could turn in every direction and shatter every reality, but there's no other life than the one we choose to build. I just feel like that's like life and love advice for everyone.
Yeah.
Right? Just super sweet and like, you forge your own way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's deep.
It is deep, especially for Rowan.
Yeah, Rowan thinks with his dick most of the time. But
Absolutely.
It's cute.
What were your favorite quotes, Dad?
I already said mine. Was,
all of them?
Yeah. Yep.
Oh, well, that brings us to questions. Mindy, did you have any questions?
My only question is, what more can fucking happen now?
Yeah, we still have like 3 chapters.
I know. I'm like, what is going on here? So, yeah, I don't know. It'll be interesting.
Something. Yeah, I only had one question, too. I wrote this in all capital letters, all caps. I said, who is Anna and why do I hate her? This is the
like her
second
either.
time we've seen her.
She definitely seems a little too flirty.
Like, who is she? We briefly saw her when Sloane went to Boston and then ran away. And it was like, oh, this is my friend Anna. And she's like, oh no, you look like a girlfriend. And then Sloane pieced out. And now we're seeing her again at this grand opening.
They're friends. Like,
I wonder if she's going to be
her.
in Fion's book.
Maybe.
Because Rowan talks about how she and Sloane have become really good friends. But like, we as the reader
don't see Sloane and her.
Like, I still don't know who she is, but I don't like her. And maybe that's my bias that I need to
I'm biased too,
investigate.
because I literally thought the same thing. I was like, why is that bitch there?
I know.
She reminds me of, who's the girl in Bridgerton, the blonde with all the
Cressida?
Cressida. Yeah.
That's who I think of when I
That's
think
who
of
you
her.
picture. That's funny.
That's not our picture, but just like that attitude and
That's
vibe.
who I'm going to picture now. That's hilarious. Deb, did you have any questions?
I have 2. So my first one is, and Whitney, I think you can probably answer this. Sloane blamed being late to the restaurant opening on Lark and Lachlan and tells Rowan that she thinks they hooked up. Is this the scene from the next book when they're on the balcony?
I think so, yes.
Okay.
That's what I assume.
And if you've not read the next book, like, Leather and Lark have a very big reason for like not liking each other.
Yeah.
And they start making out on the balcony and then they're like, wait a second.
Yeah.
Wait a second. So my next one is a really big question. So why are there so many serial killers? So she says South Bay killer. That's what they call him, right, David? And so I looked up because I wanted to know if she was going off a specific serial killer for that. And it turns out that there is a insane amount of serial killers that come out of like Southern California.
Wow.
So I did a little digging and from 5 minutes of research found at least 23 notable ones. Southern California only.
It's
so
kind of crazy.
Obviously, I'm not going to tell you about 23 serial killers, but I do want to talk about a few.
That.
Yeah. So the first one that came out of Southern California is the Zodiac Killer.
Oh, yeah.
And this serial unaliver had at least 37 victims who were usually couples, and he named himself in the media and has actually never been caught, which is terrifying. I did not know that.
Yeah.
Next is one I haven't heard of. And Whitney, you're going to tell me if you've heard of it. His name is the Doodler.
Yeah, I talked about him.
You did?
Yeah, I talked about him and the goofy names for...
Oh, I'm so sorry. Okay. So just to remind our listeners and me, apparently, this jackass had 14 victims from the gay community who he would draw before he murdered them. So this person has also never been caught.
Yeah.
There was a prolific group of killers out of the area named the Zebra Killers that between 1973 and 1974 killed at least 15 people, and they were implicated for 8 others. But the authorities believe that the body count could have been as high as 73.
That's ridiculous.
So
Holy
they were
crap.
all caught when an acquaintance came forward who witnessed all the murders firsthand. Yeah. So let's not forget that apparently visiting anywhere in Southern California in the 70s and 80s was unsafe. David Carpenter was known as the Trailside Killer and found his victims at Southern California state parks.
Oh, lovely.
Carpenter was caught and sentenced to death by the gas chamber, but remains on death row at San Quentin to this day. Next, we have Fernando Cota, a suspected serial killer of at least 6 murders, but he offed himself when he botched kidnapping a victim. So at least we have one who's not on the earth. Like, goodbye.
Yeah.
So next we have the Santa Rosa hitchhiker killer, which some theorize is actually also the Zodiac Killer.
Yeah.
Ooh.
They are known for at least 7 victims, but possibly dozens more. And the same as Zodiac Killer, this person's never been apprehended.
Yeah.
Did you guys ever watch the movie? What was the movie where the guy thinks his mom, he goes back and saves his mom. Remember, he has like the little radio, and his mom is killed by a serial killer, and he goes back and Frequency. That's what it is. Did you guys ever watch
Was
that?
Dennis
watch
Quaid
that.
in that?
Dennis Quaid was in it.
Or Jim Caviezel.
Yeah, but
one
what
of those
happens
guys.
is, it's like,
I remember
it
that
might have
movie.
been the Zodiac Killer, but what happens is his mom is on shift and messes up something as a nurse, and he dies, so there's no more killings. But when he goes back and saves his mom, she doesn't stop that guy from dying, and he continues to kill people. Yeah, it's a really cool movie. You guys should watch it. Sorry, it took me 18 minutes to remember what it was called. Okay, so the final 3 I want to discuss are probably the most widely known. The Golden State Killer case has had the most movement in the last decade because he was just captured in 2018. So the Crime Junkie podcast has a great episode on this piece of crap and how he was finally arrested. And weirdly enough, Patton Oswalt's wife, who unfortunately passed away, was researching all of this and helped tremendously with the case.
Yes.
Ironically, Patton Oswalt is a serial killer in the Veronica Mars
I know, I was
series.
going to say that.
Right.
Yeah.
So about the Golden State Killer, though, he is a retired police officer.
Yep.
And
Wow.
he's responsible for what they know of 13 murders, 50 rapes, and over 100 burglaries.
God.
Yeah, he actually had 3 different nicknames before they knew that it was all the same person.
Right.
Wow.
He is a monster.
Yeah.
Just a monster. So the next one you all have probably heard of is the Unabomber. This was
Oh,
big
yeah.
news when we were younger. He targeted victims who were advancing modern technology by sending them package bombs. So luckily he was caught in 1996 and died just last year in prison.
Wow.
Oh,
Like
I
you
didn't know
think of
that.
these serial killers as
Like they're
being-
gone.
They're all
Like,
gone.
yeah.
They're not.
Yeah.
So last and certainly not least on the scale of fuck-upedness is Richard Ramirez, who had at least 13 victims in the 1980s. He left satanic symbols at his crime scenes, which earned him the nickname of Whitney,
The Night Stalker.
the Night Stalker.
Yeah.
Yep. He died in prison just in 2013.
Yep.
Wow.
Yeah.
I did
so-
a deep dive on him our second episode
Yeah.
when I talked about disorganized versus organized.
Right.
Yeah.
So you all know this, but I plan to move to Southern California someday, but this is like really making me rethink it. Like,
Yeah.
isn't it scary that short list of serial killers that we've all heard of are from that
same
area?
area.
One place. One
It's
tiny
terrifying.
little place.
Like, I'm like, what's in the water? What are the police not
Yeah.
doing? Like, why are all of these prolific people from that same
This
space?
place. Yeah.
It makes you wonder if there's some like mastermind or some group that's like,
What
like-
the fuck, Mindy?
sorry,
That's
like
terrifying.
well, no, like that's like breeding all these. Like he's
I know
like,
that's terrifying,
sorry.
though.
Well, I mean, I already don't want to go camping in Southern California because I don't want to get
killed by the trailside killer.
killed on a trail. Like
I know, but I mean, I didn't realize all these movies I've seen that are about serial killers. They are all from Southern
that's
California.
crazy.
Yeah.
It's insane. So yeah, just like, be safe, people that live out there. And Southern California listeners, if you have like other ones you want to add to the list,
Yeah.
please write us. I mean, this was very fast research. So if I
Sure.
said something wrong, obviously, please also send me a correction. But it's really scary.
Yeah.
Really, really
Wow.
scary. And maybe
is.
it's just because the population's so dense out there. I don't know.
There's something about certain time periods that have a lot of
70s
serial
and 80s
killers.
for sure.
There's something
but
about certain locations.
A lot of these serial killers were active into the 90s, which is not that long ago,
It
people.
really isn't.
Yeah.
It's like the same
It's
thing.
scary.
Have you seen the thing going around about like when women could vote, when they could own property, when black
Yeah.
women could vote? Is not that long ago.
No, it's
Yeah.
And
not.
it's terrifying to think that
It's
we've
recent
not,
history.
We've not
Yeah.
made that much headway in
pretty
these
sad.
serial killer cases or in
Yeah.
women's rights.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Well, I'm going to have nightmares tonight.
Hey, at least the person I talked about didn't live in our fucking city.
Well, he's dead.
he's
now.
gone now.
Well, so are some of these people.
Well, that's true.
But yeah, 3 out of like the 8 I talked about have never been found. So that's kind of
Well,
scary.
let's end on a higher note and talk about what we're looking forward to. We only have one episode
I
left for
know.
Butcher and Blackbird.
You know what it is for me? It's the eyeball proposal. I think it is so
Forgot about
funny.
that.
I forgot
Oh,
about
that's
that
gonna be
too.
amazing.
Yeah.
I forgot about that
Because
too.
he always teases her about gouging the eyeballs
Yeah.
out.
yeah. What are you looking forward to, Mindy?
I'm actually really looking forward now to reading Leather and Lark because
yeah,
of
me too.
finding all these little hints that we get, like
Me
the
too.
one about the Montagues and we get about Lachlan and Lark. The one, where they're obviously fucking on the balcony. They have already had that encounter. They already loathe each other.
Yeah.
Then, like, when she asked him to do the cleanup after the David incident, like, at that point, like, I don't remember what I thought, but, like, I didn't realize that's what he did.
Lachlan?
Yeah.
He was a cleanup person.
Yeah.
Me too. Yeah. I
So,
didn't
like,
realize
all
that
those
either.
little hints, like, little Easter eggs. And I'm like,
Yep.
oh, this is great. I can't
Yeah.
wait to.
I'm excited
Yeah.
about that too. And I think the thing I'm looking most forward to is just, Rowan and Sloane just need like a moment of peace. Like
they
they've
do.
been through some stuff and they're finally like together. So let's just everybody be calm and just like lay down.
Maybe don't open a restaurant this year.
Right.
Maybe like just let's like have fun and maybe go on a vacation.
Yeah, like
take a little break from the competition.
Yeah, let's maybe not.
I mean,
kill
let's face
somebody.
it, Sloane already won.
I know. Yeah, like let's maybe.
Well, and she even says that she's like, I count this as a win. It's 3 out of 5, asshole.
Yeah, like let's take a nap in a
Yeah.
hammock together. You know what I mean? Like let's read some pirate porn together or something. Like I want.
And if you need to get your rage out, just go to one of those places where you like throw
you can
plates and
break
TVs.
things. Yes, that's what I'm looking forward to. But
Breaking shit.
yeah, sure. Get your rage out, friends.
Did you say yours, man?
Yeah, Leather and Lark. I want to read.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
Is there anything else you guys wanted to talk about with these sections?
That about
No,
does
I
it
think
for
I've
me.
already scared myself.
Yeah,
I
I'm
know.
not going to
Like-
sleep well tonight.
I know. I don't think I am either.
Thanks for listening, though.
Yeah. Well, friends, next week we will be on a break, but the week after that we'll be back with the last episode for Butcher and Blackbird before we start Leather and Lark. Next time we'll talk about chapters 23 through the epilogue and a bonus chapter.
Can't
Bye,
wait.
everybody.
Bye.
Like what you heard in this episode? Follow Our Nerdiest Thing on Instagram at instagram.com/Our Nerdiest Thing or Facebook at facebook.com/Our Nerdiest Thing. We love hearing from fellow nerds. Email us at ournerdiestthing@gmail.com.